It's tabletop time!
So we heard you like dragons.
I do!
So in this video, we're going to be painting some.
And while we're painting, we're going to be diving into a little bit of the lore behind the dragons in Dungeons and Dragons.
And this video is sponsored by Dragons, specifically Velrock's Company of Dragons, a brand new collection of miniatures available on My Mini Factory Frontiers. And that's what we'll be painting today.
Dungeons and Dragons. Well, specifically, dragons. The mystical ancient beings known as dragons dominate the psyche of many a young person growing up, and Dungeons and Dragons is a world in which they are real. Dragons have always been extremely important to D&D for obvious reasons, but it is not just the great mythical worms that we refer to when we say dragons. The Forgotten Realms are full of a menagerie of draconic creatures, and perhaps none are more impactful on the players of D&D themselves as the Dragonborn, the draconic ancestors of dragons that can be played as playable characters in games of D&D.
So one of the awesome features about Velrock's Company of Dragons is your ability to edit them before you 3D print them. So all the individual components of these models are actually still separate on the mesh and are super easy to modify. So easy, I'm going to tell you how to do it right now, and it will only take about 20 seconds. So what you need to do is import the STL into Blender and then go over to the Edit tab. Select one of the vertices, they're those little dots, and then press Ctrl-L to select all linked vertices. And then you right-click and go Separate Selection. When you go back to the Object tab, the area you've separated is now a free-floating object that you can manipulate, rotate, move around at will. That's it, tutorial over. So I put a bunch of 3D models that are all pre-supported onto the print bed, so Jen and I will be able to pick our favorites to paint later.
There's a huge range to choose from, so we picked out some of our favorites, and I'm excited to get started.
Wow.
Wow!
So it looks like everything has printed successfully.
And for the first time print as well, that is very exciting.
And that's due to the fact that all these models are professionally supported by Table Flip Foundry, the creator of the cones of calibration.
Savouring some more of those peelies.
Hey Jen!
Yay!
We have printed a selection of these Company of Dragons minis, but which ones do you want to paint?
I really like this little druid lady. I think that she's super cute. I'd also like to paint this rogue female. She looks really cool. I like her puffy pants. I think the drake's pretty cool. I think the ox is very interesting. It's like not something I'd expect.
You love the ox. Yeah. Why don't you paint the ox then? Okay. So when painting the Dragonborn that I had selected, I decided to go for the slap chop method, spraying in the black undercoat with a grey and then a white zenithal on top, and I was going to be using some contrast paint. As a final touch on this method, I did do a bit of a dry brush of pure white on top just to pick out all of those detailed areas, and then I would set to work. So I had some choices to make. In D&D, the skin colour or scale colour of your Dragonborn is entirely up to you. Although the official lore states that most Dragonborn seem to have over time homogenized into a roughly brassy or ruddy colored scheme. And that's due to the intermingling and interbreeding of their population over a very long period of time. However, some Dragonborn clans actually are really proud of their draconic lineage. I wanted to represent both here. So for my NPC models, the blacksmith father, the mother, and the child, I decided that they would all represent a common family that might be found in any NPC village in D&D. These models have that sort of homogenized, rough, rustic amalgamation color in their scales. A sort of a brassy copper color.
Yeah, they definitely look like they would be at home in any D&D setting with the colors that you've chosen.
But as I was painting a selection of Dragonborn, I actually wanted to represent some other areas of the culture as well. So for one of them, I chose a really strong red. Now this dragon is a warrior and proud of his draconic lineage from a red dragon. And red dragons in D&D are considered the baddest of the bads, basically the archetypal treasure hoarding, village destroying evil. Now to contrast this, I had my other warrior, the one that I'd customized, and this one I wanted to feel a little bit more reserved. So I used contrast paints in the grey palette. I like to imagine this is a more reserved and noble silver dragon lineage, or perhaps a white dragon lineage from the snowy areas of the world. A Dragonborn's draconic lineage also determines their breath attack in D&D. Something that I find interesting about Dragonborns is that they are clan-centric and clan-first. Their naming convention actually places the name of the clan before their first name. So if your clan was Taknavak or something like that, I would be Taknavak Dave and you would be
Taknavak Jen.
Good work, Jen. Nice, good work on pronouncing a word I just made up.
Thanks. So typically, if they are in a clan, are they usually the same color as well, or is there a mixture of different colors?
This, of course, all comes down to the GM. But I guess broadly, if they have followed that homogenous, more multicultural society, they're more likely to have scales in a sort of brassy or bronze color. But if they're from a more isolated clan that cares about their lineage, they'll have the striking color dependent on the dragon they descended from. It really depends on your lore, and I think this is a really cool way to show the differences in the world between the different Dragonborn cultures your players might interact with.
Dragonborn also like to intermingle with other cultures as well, or other races too. So if you have a particularly diverse town or city, you can absolutely add Dragonborn in there.
That's right, Dragonborn are broadly fairly open, provided that you have a sense of drive towards self-improvement and excellence and being self-sufficient, they will respect you just as much. However, clan before all else in Dragonborn society. That doesn't mean that you can't join their clan though. This is of course GM's discretion, but broadly, the books seem fairly accepting upon the idea that Dragonborn clans can have non-Dragonborn members living in them. As long as everyone is working towards the same goal of clan-first survival, you're more than welcome to hang out with your dragon friends.
That's really cool, I love that.
Just be careful of the high fives, they've got claws.
Today, we're super excited that the sponsor of our video is not only Miniatures, a miniature creator, but a beloved member of our community. Velrock Miniatures, who is in fact the designer of Chetsu, one of the characters for our Gatecrash games, has sponsored this video for their brand new My Mini Factory Beyond the Frontier campaign, Company of Dragons 2.
So for this particular campaign, you're getting 28 different miniatures for you to 3D print at home.
For only $30, this campaign is super affordable and will give you everything you need to introduce entire tribes and societies of Dragonborn into your games of D&D.
These models come pre-supported, so they're super easy for you guys to print at home.
But that is not all. Velrock is an amazing creator with a My Mini Factory Tribes. Every month you get a selection of fantastic miniatures, and unlike Patreon, you can actually pick to pledge for just the fantasy or just the sci-fi. It's really flexible. This month we've got an awesome Warcraft-inspired warband, as well as some really cool sci-fi Dragonborn armed with armor and guns, perfect for all kinds of wargaming on the tabletop.
Velrock also has a ton of previous campaigns that they've run before that are still available to purchase on My Mini Factory. I'm particularly fond of the Curious Critters campaign, where they had chibi little adorable characters, and they're amazing.
But you're here for dragons, and if you missed the Company of Dragons 1 campaign, you can actually get all the minis involved in that for a huge percentage off by upping your pledge in the Company of Dragons 2 campaign. And just for viewers of Tabletop Time, Velrock has made the code Tabletop Time, and if you use that, you'll get 10% off your campaign pledge.
So thank you so much, Velrock, for sponsoring, and I really hope you all go and check out Velrock's page, My Mini Factory, and current campaign. It would be fantastic to see a big boost and get up to some of those stretch goals.
But for now, we've got to go paint some dragons.
Yeah, I'm having a lot of fun with it. Let's do it.
All right, let's go.
So I've stopped painting my models halfway through because I realized we need bases for these. And D&D often uses a grid-based system where an inch is a single grid square, which means small and medium-sized creatures use a 1-inch base, which is a 25mm base, and large creatures would then use 4 squares, which would be, in round base terms, a 50mm base. So we don't have anything in the studio that will make that quick and easy, and I thought with the villagers and guard aesthetic we're building here, it'd be really cool to make a little cobblestone aesthetic. So I'm actually going to use some of these rollers and some green stuff and set about making some custom little cobbled village bases with some mud and tufts coming out of them. As I move on to painting a bunch more of the colors on these models, I thought I'd be slightly self-indulgent and tell you all about my Dragonborn clan in my D&D game. So Dragonborn can be super diverse and are a really fun way to add character into your D&D games. And with this clan-centric attitude in my worlds in D&D, I actually have these massive draconic gods, great beasts and, well, literal gods that live on the material plane with the other mortal races. And the capital city of the Dragonborn nation is actually built on and around a sleeping Dragonborn god, who has been slumbering for 1,000 years. This god is a benevolent dragon and a great lover of the civilization that surrounds him. So he's in fact decided to remain asleep despite being completely aware of everything going on around him. And that's because while he was originally slumbering, in the interim, an entire city has been built on and around him. Each of his exhalations provides the warmth to keep the Dragonborn hatchery at an ideal temperature for little baby Dragonborns to hatch, and he's gotten to the point where he realizes if he wakes up up and moves, he's going to destroy half their city.
We even have a few players that actually have Dragonborn as their PCs, and they have really cool backstories and do really awesome things in the game that I feel like D&D is more rich with them in it. After all, the game is called Dungeons and Dragons, so why not more dragons?
Now, with most of my contrast colors down, I was happy to put in the final touches, and I have to say the contrast method for me on these models was looking okay, but I wanted to uplift it all with a final highlight. And there they are, finished except for their bases.
I have to say, I absolutely love this little model of a child Dragonborn. He's so cute, and I'm really glad that Velrock added this to the collection.
I love collections that have awesome PC options, but I love even more ones that have NPCs. It's really cool to see civilians mixed in with this release. And just look at this Dragonborn child. He's so proud.
He's so cute.
So what you pondering there, Dave?
Well, Jen, I lost my orb, so I've been left to ponder the monster manual.
Anything good?
Yeah, I found out a whole bunch about a lot of creatures that are almost dragons. So we have things like wyverns, guard drakes, fairy dragons, pseudo dragons,
Turtle dragons?
turtle dragons, dragon turtles.
A lot of dragons.
Yeah, it seems that to preserve the special pedestal that dragons are on, they've created a whole bunch of tangentially related creatures that feel like dragons without actually being dragons. So in celebration of learning about this, I think I'd like to hear about how you painted your almost dragon.
In a very dragon way.
So when it came time to painting up my models, I had a pretty clear idea of how I wanted to paint these guys. I started off by spraying underneath with some purple and on the top with some brown.
Now, Jen, I noticed you had a lot of the really interesting looking PC characters. I kind of grabbed 2 fighters, or a paladin, a fighter, and then some NPCs. But here it looks like you've got a rogue.
Yeah, I actually really like this rogue. I grabbed a couple of what I would consider a PC characters and one NPC character. So this was a rogue, and I also had a druid and a fighter with me too. So without any context, I went ahead and started painting the skin color of my Dragonborn. And I kind of thought about what color would match well with their class. So for the rogue, I painted them blue, for the druid, green, and for the fighter, I decided to go with a red.
It's interesting, you painted all 3 of these Dragonborn in chromatic color schemes, which basically means the descendants of the evil dragons.
Totally unintentional. I kind of just went with colors that I thought would look cool, to be honest.
Now, of course, the lineage of the Dragonborn has no bearing on their alignment. Supposedly, evil dragons in ancient history can have spawned a lineage of Dragonborn that go on to make their own culture. So there's absolutely no restriction on what color Dragonborn you want to be.
Absolutely. I totally picture all of these PCs as characters that possibly are nomads. So one of the models I did have was this little beastie from Velrock's collection. And I picked him up straight away, and I thought he looked really cool, and it kind of reminded me of like a cow or an ox from our world. I really love the concept that they've used here, where it's this draconic sort of civilization, and that's been adapted into other animals. So for example, this ox has a ton of scales on it that look like dragon scales. I have to admit, I had to resist temptation painting it black and white, or white with black spots. But I decided to
Oh my gosh, like a cow?
Like a cow.
Oh, that's so cute, like a dairy ox. I really love the idea that in this civilization, you could have your PCs go into part of the desert, and then you'd encounter basically analogs to animals they're familiar with, but all who descended from reptiles or dragons.
It creates a really unique experience as well, having these creatures that maybe aren't in the Dungeons and Dragons book, so you can come up with your own ideas. So once all the skin was done on all my Dragonborn characters, I moved on to painting in their clothes. I just went for some really contrasting colours, or colours that mixed well with the palette that I had chosen. For example, on this bar maiden that I have, who I would consider is an NPC, I used a lot of warm tones and even added some little splashes of tomato sauce or beer on her apron just to give her that lived-in feel.
You've gotten really amazing at being able to paint these huge groups of models really quickly in this style, and it makes me super jealous that we don't have this for my D&D games at home.
Thank you.
Whoa, what is that?
That is the latest issue of Dragons Monthly, the Centerfold.
And I was just using it as a way to study up the different colors of dragons. See, in D&D, dragons are loosely broken up into groups or categories. The two most well-known categories are metallic dragons and chromatic dragons. The metallic dragons representing the good dragons and all having a color that aligns with a metal, such as gold or silver. And the chromatic dragons are the colored dragons, such as red or green, and these are traditionally evil.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe there's also gem dragons.
There are more dragons, and the more supplement books you get, the wider you go into D&D, the more content there is. Gemstone dragons, planar dragons, shadow dragons, Draco liches.
All the dragons.
Dragons go on and on and on. And why? Because people just love dragons. There is something exceedingly cool about the idea of an ancient giant reptile that can breathe an energy weapon attack and is intelligent, more so than humans.
So good, in fact, they even named it on the title of Dungeons & Dragons.
But there is one person at the studio who is more fascinated with dragons than anybody else. Famously fascinated with dragons, in fact. So we gave the most draconic model from the Company of Dragons collection to Murray.
Okay, so I have my model. Now I have to figure out how to paint it. Looking at this dragon, it looks most like a bronze dragon, so maybe I'll paint it like that.
Dragon. Oh. Okay, so I get to start painting this dragon. However, despite confessing a huge love of dragons, don't know a lot about dragons in D&D, but I do know enough to know that technically this isn't a dragon, Dave.
No, it doesn't have wings.
Yeah, certainly in the sort of Western world of dragons, Eastern dragons don't have wings.
That's true, they fly with magic. And there's no reason why this couldn't be a magically flying dragon in your campaign setting.
So I thought you were painting a bronze dragon, but I see you're adding some green in here, Murray.
Yes, I want to go for a little flavour. I had a little look at all the official artwork for bronze dragons, and they sort of go with a sort of tan colour, but with a green undertone, sort of like a verdigris effect, which I think is their way of representing bronze. So I decided that I would have a lot of green in the recesses, particularly along this sort of sail fin down the dorsal spine.
Something that's really interesting about dragons in D&D is the way their scales change color as they age. So when a dragon is born, their scales are actually extremely vibrant in the color, but as they age, their scales dull over time and actually lose their luster.
Yeah, well, I also want this bronze dragon to be quite desaturated, so you don't confuse it with a gold dragon. I think that could be a bit of a problem I run into, so I want to make sure it's as un-gold as possible. Okay, so you might be able to see here that I'm starting to shade the scales, but I'm not just using one colour, I'm actually using about 3 different colours just to add a bit of luster. I want these scales to be really shiny. Now, I think it's really important when you start painting larger and larger models is that you're not so much worried about painting a really nice smooth gradient. It's all about texture. You want to give the idea or the concept of what the material is you're painting rather than focusing on smooth lines. So I'm going to go for a nice rough and ready line strokes just to paint in the carapace. Now, since this is a metallic dragon, I want to recreate that sort of metallic sheen. So honestly, this is kind of starting to look a bit more like non-metallic metal on this dragon. And as such, I'm not going to paint or highlight every single scale. That would be, I think, the standard way you'd paint something, but I'm going to only go for very select areas, sort of like splashes and ribbons of light hitting certain parts of the anatomy.
Something that struck me about the model you're painting is that bronze dragons in D&D actually typically live around oceans and tropical islands. So the fact that you've got a dragon without wings, it's a very long serpentine shape, actually makes it look super appropriate for an aquatic dragon.
Yeah, that works. Also, the very light pale underbelly would make good camouflage hunting prey underwater. I think he's looking forward to some awesome reveals.
As always, thank you to all of our patrons for supporting us and helping us make these videos. We're so glad to be back this year. It's going to be a super cool year, and thanks for hanging out and watching. And for those patrons who joined over the Christmas break, thank you to the Royal Society for the Prevention of Birds.
And Richard Cook.
And Sander Groenwedge. Hopefully I said that right.
Crushed it.
If you've been loving these dragon models as much as we have, make sure to use the code TABLETOPTIME to get 10% off your campaign pledge.
Oh my goodness, we had so much fun painting dragony things today. What was your favorite dragony thing?
The one I painted.
Okay, what was yours, Jen?
The little ox thing with the scales, I thought that was really cool and I really enjoyed painting
That's
it.
cool design, yeah, I like that.
Yeah, I rated all the little Dragonborn NPCs. I love non-combatants in my game. They're so rare to see miniatures of civilians. I mean, you can get some, but not...
They are shockingly rare
Yeah.
in the world of fantasy miniatures.
Please subscribe and follow and like and do all those things so we know that you love what we do. And hey, go check out Velrock's campaign over on My Mini Factory. It is absolutely awesome. Company of Dragons 2, links in the description.
Listen to him, he's shining and glowing.
I am.